The sky above Sol burned with colors that Earth had never seen before. Purple and green lights danced across the clouds as massive ships descended through the atmosphere. Taman pressed his back against the ruined wall of what used to be a shopping center and checked his rifle. The weapon felt useless in his hands. He had seen what these aliens could do. Bullets bounced off their shields like raindrops on glass. 3 months ago, they came without warning. The Valthine Empire, they called themselves. Beautiful creatures that looked almost human but moved with impossible grace. Their skin shimmered with a faint golden light, and their eyes held colors that seemed to shift and change. They spoke every human language perfectly from the moment they arrived. They did not come to negotiate. They came to conquer. Earth's armies tried to fight. Nuclear weapons were launched. The missiles simply stopped in midair and fell harmlessly into the ocean. Fighter jets attacked their ships and were swatted away like insects. Tanks fired until their barrels melted and nothing happened. In 2 weeks, every major city had fallen. In a month, organized resistance was crushed. Now 3 months later, only scattered groups of survivors remained, hiding in ruins and striking when they could. Taman had been a special forces soldier before the invasion. Now he was just another desperate man trying to survive. His sister Hyejin crouched beside him, her hands shaking as she held a small device she had built from salvaged parts. She was an engineer, brilliant with machines, but even her genius meant nothing against technology millions of years more advanced. The convoy should pass in 5 minutes, whispered Daehyun from his position near the corner. He was Taman's oldest friend, the one who always had a plan. Together they had survived the fall of Seoul, the destruction of the military base, and a dozen failed missions. Same as yesterday. 3 transport vehicles, 2 guardships. Taman nodded. They were not trying to destroy the convoy. That would be impossible. They just wanted to steal supplies, maybe some weapons they could study. Small victories were all they had left. The plan fell apart within seconds of the convoy's arrival. The Valthine knew they were there. The transport vehicles stopped and soldiers emerged with weapons that hummed with blue energy. Taman ordered everyone to run, but more ships appeared overhead, cutting off their escape routes. One by one, his people fell, not killed but paralyzed by some kind of energy beam that left them conscious but unable to move. Taman tried to fight. He fired his rifle until it clicked empty, then drew his knife and charged. A Valthine soldier simply pointed at him, and his body locked in place. He fell to the ground frozen, his mind screaming at his limbs to move. Beside him, Hyejin and Daehyun suffered the same fate. Around them, the last members of their resistance cell lay helpless on the broken street. The Valthine soldiers were not cruel. They picked up the humans carefully, almost gently, and loaded them onto the transport vehicles. Taman could see everything but could do nothing. His body was a prison. They flew for what felt like hours, leaving Earth's surface behind and climbing into orbit. The orbital command ship was bigger than any city Taman had ever seen. It hung in space like a small moon, its surface covered with lights and structures that defied human understanding. The transport docked inside, and the prisoners were carried through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls glowed with soft light, and strange symbols scrolled across surfaces like living text. Finally, they entered a massive chamber. The throne room, Taman realized with a sinking feeling. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet overhead, and the walls were made of something that looked like crystallized starlight. At the far end, on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single piece of black diamond, sat Queen Ilvara. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Taman had ever seen. Tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered gold and silver, and eyes that held entire galaxies within them. Her presence filled the room like gravity, pulling attention and crushing hope. Around her stood her advisors and nobles, creatures of similar beauty and power, all watching the captured humans with expressions ranging from amusement to boredom. The paralysis released, and Taman and the others collapsed to the floor. Guards pulled them to their knees, forcing them to look up at the queen. Ilvara studied them for a long moment, then spoke. Her voice was musical and ancient, carrying weight that made the air itself feel heavy. "Humans," she said, and the word sounded both curious and dismissive. "You continue to resist even when resistance is meaningless. I have conquered 1,000 worlds. Some fought with weapons that could crack planets. Some fought with minds that could reshape reality. All of them fell. Your Earth was barely worth the effort of landing." Taman wanted to scream, to curse her, to do anything but kneel there helplessly. But he remained silent, watching and listening. Beside him, Hyejin was crying quietly, and Daehyun's jaw was clenched so tight it looked ready to break. However, Ilvara continued, leaning forward slightly, I have decided to grant your species a gift, a demonstration of Valthene mercy and power. She gestured elegantly with one hand. I will choose one of you. That person may ask for anything they desire, and I will grant it. Any wish, any desire. This is my word as Queen of the Valthene Empire. The humans looked at each other in confusion. This had to be a trick, some kind of cruel game. The Valthene nobles around the throne smiled, clearly amused by something the humans did not understand. A Valthene advisor stepped forward and walked among the prisoners, examining them like specimens. He stopped in front of Taemin. This one, he said. He has the eyes of a warrior. Let him speak his wish and reveal the pathetic hopes of his species. Guards pulled Taemin to his feet and pushed him forward. He stumbled, then caught his balance and stood as straight as he could. His body ached from the paralysis and his mind raced with possibilities. What could he ask for? Freedom for Earth? The life of every human? Would she twist his words? Deny him, mock him? Queen Ilvara looked down at him with those galaxy-filled eyes. Speak, human. What does your heart desire above all else? Choose carefully. This offer will not come again. Taemin thought about Earth burning. He thought about his parents who had died in the first days of the invasion. He thought about the billions of humans now living under alien rule. He thought about what it meant to be human, to be weak and small in a universe filled with powers beyond comprehension, and then he knew what to ask for. He met the Queen's eyes without flinching and spoke in a clear, steady voice. I wish for humanity to have a real chance. A fair fight. Give us 30 years to prepare and then face us as equals. No tricks, no mercy, just war. When the 30 years end, come back and we will meet you in battle. If we win, Earth goes free. If you win, we accept eternal slavery. The throne room fell into absolute silence. Every Valthene in the chamber stared at Taemin as if he had grown a second head. Queen Ilvara's expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been respect. Then she began to laugh. Not mockery, but genuine amusement. You did not ask for peace, she said, her voice filled with wonder. You did not beg for mercy or freedom. You asked for war. Yes, Taemin said simply, a fair war. The Queen's laughter faded and her expression became serious. Around her, the nobles began arguing in their musical language, some pointing at Taemin, others gesturing frantically at Ilvara. The High Commander, a massive Valthene with silver skin and cold eyes, stepped forward. My Queen, you cannot seriously consider this absurd request. 30 years means nothing. They will still be primitives. We will crush them in days. There is no honor in this, no purpose. But Ilvara raised her hand for silence. She studied Taemin for a long moment, and he could feel her mind touching his, reading his thoughts, searching for deception. She would find none. He meant every word. The law of our people is absolute, Ilvara finally said. A monarch's word once given cannot be broken. This is the foundation of the Valthene Empire. I offered him any wish bound by ancient law and tradition. She smiled, cold and dangerous. Very well, human. I accept your wish. 30 years from this day, the Valthene Empire will return to Earth's coordinates. You will have your fair war. Prepare however you can. We will provide star charts and basic technology as a starting point to make this fight somewhat interesting. She stood from her throne, and her presence seemed to grow, filling the entire chamber. But know this, Taemin of Earth. When we return, there will be no mercy. Your people will face the full might of an empire that has conquered galaxies. If you lose, and you will lose, humanity will serve the Valthene for all eternity. Taemin bowed his head, not in submission but in acknowledgement. We will be ready, he said quietly. As guards escorted them from the throne room, Daehyun grabbed Taemin's arm. Are you insane? He whispered urgently. 30 years against an empire of millions of years? We cannot win this. Taemin looked back at the throne room one last time, seeing Queen Ilvara watching him with those ancient, curious eyes. We do not need to win, he said. We just need to make them regret coming back. The Valthene ships left Earth's orbit within a week. True to Queen Ilvara's word, they withdrew completely, leaving behind data modules containing star charts, basic faster-than-light travel principles, and manufacturing specifications. The modules appeared simultaneously at every major research facility still standing on Earth. No explanation, no ceremony, just the promised information and then empty skies. Taman stood in what remained of the United Nations building in Geneva, facing representatives from every surviving government on Earth. Most of them looked at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to fury. The room smelled of dust and decay. Half the ceiling had collapsed during the invasion, and temporary lights cast harsh shadows across the assembled leaders. "You doomed us all," the American president said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "We could have asked for peace. We could have asked for them to leave and never return. Instead, you asked for a war we cannot possibly win." Taman stood at the podium, his hands gripping the sides to keep them steady. He had not slept since returning from the orbital command ship. His mind kept replaying the moment over and over, searching for any sign he had made the wrong choice. He found none. "They were never going to leave," he said quietly. "Not permanently. The Valthine Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. They do not grant mercy to primitives. If I had asked for peace, Queen Ilvara would have smiled, denied the request, or twisted the words, and we would still be slaves. At least now we have a chance." "A chance?" The Chinese premier laughed bitterly. 30 years against millions of years of advancement? Their ships move faster than light. Their weapons destroy cities. Their shields stop nuclear missiles. What chance do we have?" Hijin stepped forward from where she had been standing against the wall. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "Maybe none," she admitted. "But my brother is right about one thing. They would never have truly left. Empires do not abandon conquered territory. They would have returned eventually, and we would have been unprepared, broken, and scattered. Now we have time. 30 years, and we have their basic technology." "Basic technology that we barely understand," muttered the European Union representative. Dahyun moved to stand beside Taman. His tactical mind had been working through scenarios since the moment they returned to Earth. "The Valthine made a mistake," he said. "They underestimate us because we are weak. Queen Ilvara thinks this will be entertaining. A brief distraction before they crush us. But they do not understand what humans do when we are desperate." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the history. Humans had always been at their most dangerous when facing extinction. Every great technological leap, every desperate innovation came from the edge of disaster. The Russian president stood slowly. He was an old man who had lost his entire family in the invasion. "What are you proposing?" Taman took a deep breath. "Total unity. Every nation, every resource, every person working toward a single goal. We stop being countries and become one species preparing for survival. We take their technology and we do not try to match it. We find what we are good at and we exploit it." "And what are we good at?" asked the Indian Prime Minister. "Adaptation," Taman said. "Rapid change. Mass production. Asymmetric warfare. The Valthine are ancient and powerful, but they are also rigid. They fight with honor and tradition. We fight to survive, and we do not care about honor." The Japanese representative leaned forward. "You want us to become something the Valthine have never faced before?" "Yes," Taman replied. "They have fought powerful enemies. They have fought advanced enemies. But have they ever fought an enemy that simply refuses to stop? An enemy that will sacrifice everything for even the smallest chance of victory?" The room erupted in arguments. Some leaders supported the idea, seeing no other option. Others refused to believe anything could work. But gradually, as hours turned into days of debate, a consensus emerged. Not because they believed Taman's plan would work, but because they had no alternative. The Valthine would return in 30 years. They could spend that time fighting each other, or they could spend it preparing. The Terran Survival Council was formed within a month. Every government surrendered its sovereignty to the new United Authority. Borders disappeared overnight. Military forces merged. Research facilities began sharing data without restriction. The entire human race reorganized itself with a speed that would have been impossible before the invasion. Taman found himself appointed as Director of Strategic Development, a title that meant he was responsible for figuring out how to fight gods with sticks and stones. Hyojin became the head of the engineering corps, analyzing the Valthine technology and finding ways to produce it. Daehyun took command of military restructuring, completely rethinking how humans would fight. The first year was chaos. The Valthine technology was so far beyond human understanding that scientists cried from frustration. The faster-than-light principles required mathematics that did not exist in human knowledge. The manufacturing specifications referenced materials and processes that seemed like magic. But slowly, painfully, progress came. A Korean physicist named Mirai made the first breakthrough by approaching the FTL equations like a video game puzzle rather than traditional physics. She had spent years designing virtual reality simulations and realized the Valthian math described space as a programmable medium. Within 6 months, humanity built its first crude, faster-than-light engine. It was slow, inefficient, and occasionally exploded, but it worked. Heejin's engineering teams focused on manufacturing. The Valthian specifications were designed for quality and elegance. Every component was perfect, every system optimized. Humans could not match that perfection. Instead, they focused on volume. A shipyard worker named Junho revolutionized the approach by suggesting they stop trying to build perfect ships, and instead build adequate ships very quickly. The Valthian make swords, he explained during a council meeting. Beautiful, perfect swords that last forever. We need to make bullets. Lots and lots of bullets. The philosophy spread through every branch of human development. They would not match Valthian quality. They would overwhelm with quantity. By the end of the second year, humanity had established colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan. Shipyards orbited each location, pumping out vessels that would have seemed impossible just months before. The ships were ugly, prone to breakdowns and required constant maintenance. But they flew and they could fight. Taemin barely slept during those early years. His office became his home, and his desk was always covered with reports, projections, and battle simulations. Heejin visited him one night bringing food he had forgotten to eat. "You look terrible," she said, setting down a tray with rice and soup. "I feel terrible," Taemin admitted, rubbing his eyes. "Every simulation shows us losing. Even with 30 years, we are so far behind." "Then why do you keep going?" Taemin looked at the star chart spread across his desk. They showed human expansion into nearby systems. Small dots of light representing humanity's desperate reach into the cosmos. Because Queen Ilvara made a mistake. She gave us time and underestimated what we would do with it. She thinks we will try to become like them. We will not. What will we become? Something they have never seen before. A microbiologist named Soman joined the strategic team in the third year. She brought a perspective that nobody had considered. While everyone focused on ships and weapons, she studied the Valthian themselves. The technology they left behind included biological data, genetic information that revealed fascinating details. They are nearly immortal, Somin explained during a presentation. Their cells regenerate almost perfectly. They can live for millions of years. But this makes them risk-averse. Every Valthian warrior is irreplaceable, a lifetime of training and experience. They cannot afford to be reckless. And we can, Daehyun said, understanding immediately. Exactly. Our soldiers live maybe 80 years. We can train new ones constantly. We can take risks they never would. Our tactics can be completely disposable because our people are replaced within a generation. The idea was horrifying and brilliant at the same time. Humanity's weakness, their short lives, could become a strategic advantage. They began designing weapons and tactics that no immortal species would ever conceive. Kamikaze ships, self-destructing drones, fighters designed to last for one mission before falling apart. The Valthian would be horrified. The humans would be effective. By year 5, humanity had spread to 10 star systems. By year 10, 50 systems. They moved like a virus, fast and adaptive, building hidden bases and supply depots everywhere. The ships got better, the weapons more refined, but always the focus remained on volume over quality. Taemin aged rapidly under the pressure. His hair turned gray by his 40th birthday. Heejin's hands became scarred from years of working with machinery. Daehyun's tactical brilliance came at the cost of personal relationships. They all sacrificed everything for the slim hope of survival. In the 15th year, Mirai completed the neural interface training system. Pilots could now experience thousands of combat scenarios in simulated time, learning in weeks what would have taken years. A generation of children grew up knowing nothing but preparation for war. They learned math by calculating weapon trajectories. They learned physics by the 30th year arrived with no ceremony, no celebration. Across 200 star systems, humanity held its breath and waited. Taemin stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, watching the empty space where Earth's sun should have been visible. Earth itself had been evacuated 15 years ago, its 8 billion people scattered across dozens of colony worlds. The planet remained as a decoy, rigged with enough sensors and weapons to give the Valthian a surprise. All fleets report ready, Daehyun announced from his station. His hair had also turned gray, and new scars crossed his face from a training accident years ago. 200,000 ships deployed across defensive positions, another 300,000 in reserve waiting. Taemin nodded. The numbers were staggering. Humanity had turned itself into a war machine. Every ship was crewed, every weapon loaded, every soldier ready. The cost had been enormous. Entire generations knew nothing but preparation for this day. Children born after the Valthine withdrawal had never known peace. They will come to Earth first, Taemin said. Ilvara will honor the agreement. She will expect to find us waiting there, primitive and afraid. Hyejin worked at the engineering station, monitoring the fleet's status. Her hands moved across holographic controls with practiced ease. 30 years of innovation had given her the skills that would have seemed like magic to her younger self. All systems are functioning. The new shield modifications should hold against their weapons for at least a few minutes. After that, it depends on how fast they adapt. A few minutes. Taemin smiled bitterly at how far they had come. In the beginning, human shields lasted seconds. Now they might last minutes. Progress was measured in such small increments when fighting an empire of millions of years. The tactical display showed their formation. Ships spread across three-dimensional space in patterns that would confuse traditional military doctrine. There were no clear lines, no organized ranks. Human ships clustered in swarms, overlapped in ways that made targeting difficult and left gaps that looked like mistakes but were actually traps.
When did we hear from the scout ships?
Taemin asked. 5 hours ago, replied Boknam, the fleet admiral. She was younger than Taemin, part of the generation that grew up during the preparation years. Her tactical training came from Mireille's neural simulation system. Thousands of battles fought in virtual space before ever sitting in a real command chair. They detected Valthine energy signatures approaching the Sol system. Large fleet exactly as expected. Taemin felt his heart rate increase. 30 years of planning came down to this moment. Everything humanity had built, every sacrifice made, would be tested against the reality of Valthine power. Send the message, he said quietly. Daehyun pressed the communication controls. Across the fleet, the same message transmitted to every ship, every station, every human soldier waiting in the darkness. Simple words that carried the weight of species survival. For Earth, for humanity. Today we show them what we have become. The response came back as a wave of acknowledgement. 500,000 ships, millions of human voices speaking as one. The sound filled the communication channels, a roar of defiance that echoed across the stars. Then the waiting began. Hours crawled past. Taemin forced himself to eat, to rest, to maintain his strength. But his mind never stopped working through scenarios, calculating possibilities, preparing for what was coming. The Valthine fleet arrived at Earth's coordinates exactly 30 years to the hour after Queen Ilvara had granted Taemin's wish. Their ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, 10,000 vessels of elegant design and overwhelming power. Each ship was a work of art, beautiful and deadly, but they arrived to find an empty solar system. No defending fleet, no desperate human stands, just silence and emptiness. Taemin watched through long-range sensors as the Valthine fleet hesitated. He could imagine the confusion on their command ships. They had expected to find Earth defended, humanity's last stand concentrated around their homeworld. Instead, nothing. They are scanning, Hyejin reported, looking for life signs, energy signatures, any indication of where we went. Let them look, Taemin said. The longer they search, the more time we have. An hour passed. The Valthine fleet spread out, searching the solar system. They found Mars empty, Jupiter's moons abandoned, all of humanity's obvious colonies evacuated. Finally, a single ship broke away from the fleet and broadcasted a message. Queen Ilvara's face appeared on the view screen. She looked exactly as Taemin remembered, beautiful and ageless, but her expression showed genuine curiosity mixed with surprise. Taemin of Earth, her voice carried across space. I honor our agreement. I have returned with my fleet to face humanity in fair combat, but I find only emptiness. Have your people fled, hidden, or is this some kind of trick? Taemin took a breath and activated the response channel. His face would now appear on Ilvara's command ship, an old man addressing an immortal queen. Queen Ilvara, he said formally, thank you for honoring your word. Humanity is ready to face you. But we learned something during our 30 years of preparation. Earth is not humanity. Earth is just where we started. You will not be fighting for one planet. You will be fighting for 200 star systems. The silence that followed was satisfying. Taman could imagine the reaction on the Valthene command ship. The advisors scrambling to verify his claim. The tactical officers recalculating their assumptions. 200 systems? Ilvara's voice held a note of disbelief. In 30 years you spread across 200 systems. We are adaptable, Taman replied. And we were very motivated. Show yourself, Ilvara demanded. If you wish for fair combat, then meet me. Let us discuss the terms of this war. Taman gestured to Daehyun, who began the approach sequence. The Defiance broke from its hiding position and accelerated toward the Valthene fleet. It was a small ship compared to the massive warships surrounding Earth, but it transmitted the proper diplomatic signals. The journey took 2 hours. Taman spent the time reviewing everything one final time. Hyejin sat beside him, her hand finding his. Are you scared? She asked quietly. Terrified, he admitted, but also ready. We have done everything we could. The rest depends on whether our calculations were correct. They were, Hyejin said with confidence. The Valthene are powerful, but they have weaknesses. We found them. We built weapons to exploit them. We trained soldiers who do not think like their warriors. We have a chance. Taman squeezed her hand. Thank you for believing in this, for helping make it possible. The Defiance docked with Ilvara's flagship. Taman, Hyejin, and Daehyun walked through corridors that still looked impossibly beautiful and advanced. But this time, they walked as representatives of a species that had spent 30 years becoming something new. Queen Ilvara waited in a meeting chamber, smaller than her throne room but no less impressive. She stood as they entered, studying them with those galaxy-filled eyes. Her high commander stood beside her, the same massive warrior with silver skin who had questioned Taman's wish 3 decades ago. You have aged, Ilvara observed. I forget how brief human lives are. Have you lived well during your preparation time? We have lived with purpose, Taman replied. That is enough. Ilvara gestured for them to sit. The room arranged itself, furniture flowing from the walls to create seats. Tell me what you have accomplished. I am genuinely curious. 30 years is nothing to my people, but you have clearly used the time well. Taman laid out the truth. 200 star systems occupied, 500,000 ships constructed, hidden bases and weapon platforms throughout human space, a population scattered and protected, tactics and weapons designed specifically to fight the Valthene. The High Commander listened with growing anger. This is impossible. Your species was barely capable of reaching your own moon when we arrived. Now you claim to control 200 star systems? Not control, Daehyun corrected. Occupy, there is a difference. We did not build empires. We built weapons factories. Ilvara was quiet for a long moment. You were supposed to stay on Earth, develop your technology, prepare your defenses, and meet us in honorable combat over your homeworld. You never specified those terms, Taman said. You agreed to give us 30 years and a fair fight. We chose to use that time to spread across the stars. We chose to make the fight as complicated as possible. Clever, Ilvara admitted, but ultimately futile. 200 systems mean nothing. The Valthene Empire controls millions. Your ships, no matter how numerous, are primitive. We could destroy your entire fleet with a fraction of our forces. Probably, Taman agreed. But the question is not whether you can win. The question is whether you want to pay the price of victory. He activated a holographic display, showing projections and calculations. Our analysis suggests you can defeat us in approximately 6 months of sustained warfare. But it will cost you 70% of your fleet here. Your ships are powerful but few. Ours are weak but numerous. We have built our entire strategy around trading ships for time. 10 of ours for 1 of yours. 100 for 1. We will accept any exchange rate, the High Commander sneered. You would sacrifice. The battle began at dawn, though in space there was no true dawn. Humans marked time by old Earth standards, clinging to familiar patterns in an unfamiliar war. Taman watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the Valthene fleet advanced. 10,000 ships moving in perfect formation like a school of luminous fish swimming through darkness. They are beautiful, Hyejin whispered, and she was right. Each Valthene warship gleamed with internal light, hulls that seemed to be carved from solidified starlight. They moved with grace that human ships could never match, their shields shimmering like soap bubbles in rainbow colors. Beauty does not win wars, Daehyun said from his tactical station. Baknam, execute formation Delta 7. Admiral Bochnam's voice echoed across the fleet channel. All ships, formation Delta 7. Swarm pattern, maximum dispersion. Remember your training. Trust your wings. For humanity. The response came as a roar from 500,000 throats. Human ships broke from their hiding positions and accelerated toward the Valthene fleet. They came from above and below, from the left and right, from positions that made no sense to traditional military doctrine. There was no organized front line. Instead, human ships clustered in swarms of 100 vessels each, moving like angry bees toward a target that vastly outclassed them individually. The first human ships reached the Valthene line within minutes. Railguns fired solid slugs at relativistic speeds. Missiles with crude guidance systems streaked through vacuum. Energy weapons that barely qualified as military-grade lit up the darkness with their discharge. Most of the attacks bounced harmlessly off Valthene shields, but not all of them. Taman watched as the first human ship detonated against a Valthene destroyer's shield. The explosion was massive, far larger than should have been possible from such a small vessel. The Valthene ship's shield flickered, held, then failed as two more human ships rammed into the same point. The destroyer's hull cracked, venting atmosphere and spinning out of formation. 17 ships to kill one destroyer, Daehyun reported calmly. Acceptable exchange rate. Hyejin's hands flew across her console. Their shields are adapting. They have already modified to better defend against kinetic impacts. We need to rotate to energy weapons. Wave 2 switch to energy weapons, Daehyun ordered. Wave 3 prepare exotic payloads. The Valthene responded with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons were surgical, precise, deadly. Each shot destroyed a human ship completely. No wounded vessels, no partial damage. Pure annihilation. But they could only target one ship at a time, and humans came in hundreds. It was like watching an elephant fight a swarm of ants. The elephant was stronger, faster, more powerful, but the ants kept coming, accepting losses that would break any other species. We have lost 2,000 ships, Bochnam reported. Valthene casualties, 3 vessels destroyed, 7 damaged. Taman did the math. 2,000 to 10. A horrible exchange rate. But there were 500,000 human ships. At this rate, they would destroy the entire Valthene fleet and still have ships remaining. Barely. Maybe. Queen Ilvara's voice cut through the battle channel. Taman, what have you done? Your people are throwing themselves away like garbage. This is not war. This is suicide. Taman activated his response. This is human warfare, Ilvara. We do not value individual glory. We value victory. And we have 500,000 ships willing to die for it. Madness. The High Commander's voice interjected. You sacrifice your warriors for nothing. We will still win. Yes, Taman agreed. But at what cost? The battle raged for 6 hours. Space filled with debris, both human and Valthene. Human tactics evolved in real time, adapting to Valthene responses faster than the ancient empire's rigid military doctrine could counter. Mirai's neural training system proved its worth as human pilots executed maneuvers they had practiced thousands of times in simulation. A young pilot named Yuna led the stealth division, ships that ran cold and dark, approaching Valthene vessels without power signatures. They carried single-use weapons, massive explosives that would destroy the delivery ship along with the target. Yuna's voice came across the channel, calm and steady. Stealth Group 7, we have a clean approach on Flagship Section Delta, confirming strike authorization. Authorized, Daehyun said. Good hunting, Yuna. For humanity, Yuna replied, and her signal cut out as her ship and 19 others detonated against a Valthene battlecruiser's flank. The cruiser broke apart, its shields overwhelmed by the coordinated attack. Taman felt sick watching the tactical display. Each lost ship represented dozens or hundreds of human lives, people he had trained, people who trusted his plan. But he could not afford to hesitate. Hesitation meant extinction. Valthene are pulling back, Bochnam announced. They are regrouping. The Valthene fleet withdrew to a defensive position, their formation tightening. They had lost 47 ships. A tiny fraction of their fleet, but more than they had lost in the last 1,000 years of conquest. The High Commander's voice came over the channel, directed at Ilvara but loud enough for human receivers to hear. My queen, this is unacceptable. We must use the quantum weapons. End this quickly before we take more losses. No, Ilvara said firmly. We agreed to a fair fight. The quantum weapons would make this a massacre, not a battle. These humans have earned the right to their war. Taman felt a strange respect for the alien queen. She could destroy humanity with weapons beyond comprehension, but she chose honor instead. It was a weakness, but also what made her different from a true monster. "Human fleet, ceasefire," Taman ordered. "Hold position." The human swarms pulled back, maintaining distance but not retreating. Both fleets hovered in space, separated by thousands of kilometers, both bloodied, both calculating next moves. "What are you doing?" Hijin asked urgently. "We have momentum. We should press the attack." "No," Taman said. "Ilvara is thinking. Let her think. Sometimes the pause is more effective than continued violence." Hours passed. The Valthene fleet remained in defensive formation. Their ship's beautiful hulls now showed scars and damage, something that probably had not happened in millennia. Human ships surrounded them in loose clusters, waiting, ready to resume the swarm tactics. Finally, Ilvara's image appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, which seemed impossible for a being of such power. But war exhausted everyone, even immortals. "Taman," she said, "I underestimated you. Again. Your people fight with a ferocity I have never encountered. You accept casualties that would break any rational military force." "We are not rational," Taman replied. "We are desperate. There is a difference." "Yes," Ilvara agreed. "I am beginning to understand that difference. Tell me honestly, how long can you sustain these losses?" Taman considered lying, but something in Ilvara's eyes suggested she would know. 3 days at current rates. Then we will run out of ships and your fleet will still have enough vessels to destroy our colonies. And you would fight anyway." "Yes." Ilvara was quiet for a long moment. Behind her, Taman could see Valthene advisors arguing, gesturing frantically. The High Commander looked furious, but Ilvara raised her hand for silence. "I have a proposal," she said. "A modification to our agreement. I am listening. Your wish was for a fair fight. We have fought, and I have seen what humanity became in 30 years. You are dangerous, relentless, and willing to pay any price. These are qualities I respect." She paused. "But continuing this battle serves neither of us. You will lose eventually, and I will lose most of my fleet doing it. So I propose a different test." "What kind of test?" Daehyun asked suspiciously. "Send a team to my flagship. 50 of your best warriors. If they can fight their way to my throne room and reach me, I will withdraw the Valthene Empire from human space permanently. You will have earned your freedom through demonstrated capability. If they fail, humanity surrenders and serves the Empire." The Bridge of the Defiance erupted in argument. It was obviously a trap, but it was also an opportunity. 50 warriors against a flagship. Insane odds, but better than 3 more days of fleet combat that would end with humanity's destruction anyway. "What guarantees do we have?" Taman asked. "My word," Ilvara said simply. "The same word that brought me here to honor your wish. I could use quantum weapons and end you all right now. But I choose not to. Accept my proposal or reject it, but do so knowing I am offering mercy when I do not need to." Taman looked at Hyejin and Daehyun. His sister's face was pale but determined. His friend's tactical mind was already working through the scenario. "We need 30 minutes to discuss," Taman said. "You have 1 hour," Ilvara replied, and her image vanished. The debate was fierce but brief. Some argued it was a trap designed to kill humanity's leadership. Others pointed out they were already in a death trap, just a larger one. Finally, Taman made the decision. "I will lead the team," he said. "You cannot," Boknum protested. "You are too valuable. If you die, the fleet loses its commander. If I do not go, I am asking 50 people to do something I am unwilling to do myself," Taman said firmly. "That is not leadership. Besides, this was my wish. My responsibility. I should be the one to see it through." Hyejin grabbed his arm. "Then I am going with you." "No," Taman started to say, but she cut him off. "Do not even try. You need an engineer who understands the corridors of the Valthene flagship were even more beautiful than Taman remembered. Walls of crystallized light, floors that seemed to float, ceilings that showed distant stars as if the ship's hull did not exist. But beauty meant nothing when you were walking into a trap. The 50 humans moved in tight formation, weapons raised, every sense alert. The ship was massive, kilometers long, and the throne room was at its center. They had studied the layout during their hour of preparation, but maps meant nothing against an enemy that could reshape their environment at will. "Movement ahead," whispered Giwan, one of the youngest soldiers. His neural training made him faster than anyone else on the team. His reflexes pushed to the absolute human limit. 20 meters, multiple contacts. Steady, Taman said quietly. Remember the plan. We move fast, we hit hard, we do not stop. The first Valthene warriors appeared at the corridor's end. 10 of them, tall and elegant, carrying weapons that hummed with contained energy. They moved with the grace of dancers, positioning themselves with centuries of tactical experience. Now, Daehyun commanded. The humans opened fire, not with energy weapons or advanced technology, but with good old-fashioned explosives and kinetic weapons. Grenades bounced down the corridor. Railgun slugs tore through the air. The Valthene raised their shields, easily deflecting the attacks. But that was the distraction. While the Valthene focused on the frontal assault, Hyejin activated a device she had built from scavenged technology. It was crude, barely functional, but it worked. An electromagnetic pulse that did not disable Valthene systems, but confused them for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. Giwan and 5 other neural-trained soldiers sprinted forward at speeds that would have been impossible for ordinary humans. They closed the distance before the Valthene warriors could adjust. Hand-to-hand combat began brutal and fast. Humans fought with knives, with clubs, with bare hands when weapons broke. They fought dirty, no honor, no fairness, just savage determination. Taman watched as a Valthene warrior, graceful and ancient, fell to 3 humans who simply refused to stop attacking even as his weapon burned through their armor. 1 human died, then another, but the third drove a blade through a gap in the Valthene's chest armor. Move, Taman ordered, and the team pushed forward over the bodies. 4 humans dead, 1 Valthene killed. Terrible math, but they were still moving. The ship's corridor system tried to confuse them. Walls shifted, doors sealed, lights went dark. But Hyejin had studied Valthene technology for 30 years. She hacked systems, forced doors, found routes that the ship's AI did not expect humans to use. Emergency maintenance shafts, she gasped, leading them through a narrow passage. The ship thinks we cannot fit. It is wrong. More Valthene warriors found them. Small groups, elite fighters, each one worth 10 human soldiers in terms of pure skill. But humans fought with tactics that made skilled warriors irrelevant. They used explosives in enclosed spaces, used the ship's own systems against defenders, sacrificed themselves to create openings. A human medic named Soman saved 3 people by using her knowledge of Valthene biology to target nerve clusters with electric shocks. A soldier named Junho died, buying them 15 seconds to escape an ambush. Every corridor became a small war, every door a potential death trap. Taman fought alongside his people, his old soldiers' training coming back despite his age. He was not as fast as the young ones, not as strong, but he had experience and determination. When a Valthene warrior cornered Hyejin, Taman put himself between them and took a blast meant for his sister. His armor held just long enough for Daehyun to kill the warrior with a perfectly placed shot. "How much further?" Taman asked, his side burning from the impact. 200 meters, Hyejin replied, checking her stolen schematic. "But they know where we are going. They will have everything between us and the throne room." They emerged from the maintenance shaft into a large chamber. It was a hangar bay, filled with Valthene fighter craft and equipment, beautiful machines that could dance through space faster than human ships could track. But right now they were just obstacles. Waiting for them were 50 Valthene warriors, a full company of elite soldiers, veterans of countless wars. They stood in perfect formation, weapons ready, shields overlapping in a defensive wall. "We are outnumbered," Giwan said, which was almost funny because they had been outnumbered since the moment they boarded the ship. "When has that ever stopped us?" Taehyun replied, checking his ammunition. He was down to his last magazine. Most of them were running on empty, weapons damaged, armor broken. Taeman stepped forward. 23 humans remained from the original 50, wounded, exhausted, but still standing, against 50 fresh Valthene warriors who had never lost a fight. "Listen to me," Taeman said to his team. "They are better than us. Faster, stronger, more skilled. They have every advantage, but we have something they do not understand. We have learned to lose and keep fighting. Every human alive learned this from birth. We lose and lose and lose, and then we find a way to win anyway." He looked at each face, memorizing them. Most would not survive the next 10 minutes. "Do not fight to win. Fight to move forward. Every step toward that throne room is a victory. Every second we stay alive is a victory. Make them pay for every meter." The team nodded. No more words needed. They charged. The battle in the hangar was chaos. Valthene fought with precision and grace. Humans fought with desperation and fury. Shields deflected shots, armor cracked, blood spilled, both red human blood and the silver blood of the Valthine. A young soldier threw herself at a Valthine warrior, using her body as a distraction so others could flank. She died, but 3 humans got through. Giwan moved like lightning, his neural training pushing him beyond normal human limits. He killed 2 Valthine before their weapons found him. Hyejin used explosives to collapse part of the hangar, crushing several Valthine under falling equipment. Daehyun coordinated the survivors with tactical brilliance, using the environment to create advantages where none should exist. Taemin fought with the cold efficiency of an old soldier who had nothing left to lose. His sister was alive. Some of his team was alive. That was enough. He put down warrior after warrior, accepting wounds, using pain as fuel. The Valthine formation broke. Not because they lost, but because the humans simply would not stop. Warriors accustomed to honorable combat found themselves fighting an enemy that grabbed broken equipment and used it as clubs, that detonated grenades in hand-to-hand range, that bit and clawed when weapons failed. "Through there," Hyejin shouted, pointing at a door on the far side of the hangar. "That leads to the central corridor. The throne room is close. 8 humans remained. 8 out of 50. They ran for the door, leaving behind the bodies of friends and enemies. The Valthine warriors tried to pursue, but exhaustion and confusion slowed them. These primitives should have been crushed in the first corridor. Instead, they had fought through the entire ship. The central corridor was elegant, beautiful, completely unlike the functional spaces they had crawled through. This was where the Empire showed its power. Walls covered in artwork from 1,000 conquered worlds, floors that reflected light like frozen water, and at the end, massive doors leading to the throne room. Between them and those doors stood one warrior, the High Commander himself, massive and silver-skinned, carrying a weapon that thrummed with barely contained energy. He looked at the 8 humans battered and bleeding and actually smiled. "Impressive," he said, "but this is where your journey ends. I have trained for 3,000 years. You are children playing at war." "Then you have been training wrong," Taemin replied, raising his weapon. It was nearly empty, barely functional. "You trained to be good at war. We trained to survive it. Different goals." The High Commander attacked, and it was like fighting a force of nature. He moved faster than should be possible for something his size. His weapon carved through the air, each strike precise and deadly. 2 humans fell in the first exchange, but the remaining 6 surrounded him, attacking from every angle at once. Daehyun coordinated their movements with hand signals, turning 6 exhausted fighters into a synchronized killing machine. They used the corridor walls, the beautiful artwork, even the decorative light fixtures as weapons and shields. Hyejin noticed the High Commander's energy weapon required periodic cooling. She timed an electromagnetic pulse to hit exactly when the weapon was in cooldown. It shorted out for just a moment, and that moment was all they needed. Giwan, the young soldier who had survived the hangar by pure speed, drove a blade through the High Commander's armor. The massive warrior roared, backhanding Giwan across the corridor. But the wound was real, silver blood spilling onto the perfect floor. Taemin fired his last shots at the weapon itself, destroying the cooling system. The High Commander dropped the gun before it exploded and drew a blade, ancient and beautiful. He charged at Taemin, and even wounded, he was terrifyingly fast. Daehyun stepped between them, taking the blade through his chest. He grabbed the High Commander's arm, holding him in place. "Now!" he gasped. Hyejin activated her last explosive, shaped precisely to channel force in one direction. The blast took the High Commander from behind, driving him Part 6, the price of victory. The shuttle carrying the 4 survivors docked with the Defiance in silence. No celebration, no cheers. The human fleet had watched on long-range sensors as 50 people boarded the Valthine flagship. They had seen the explosions, the signs of fighting, the terrible quiet that followed. They knew the cost. When the airlock opened, Admiral Boknam was waiting. She looked at Taemin, Hyejin, Giwan, and Somin with eyes that held too many questions. Behind her, the bridge crew stood at attention, faces pale and anxious. "Did we win?" Boknam asked simply. Taemin nodded, too tired to speak. His wounds had been healed by Ilvara's power, but exhaustion went deeper than physical damage. He had watched too many people die today. Daehyun's face kept appearing in his mind, that final smile before darkness took him. Queen Ilvara honored her agreement, Hyejin said when her brother could not find words. The Valthine Empire is withdrawing. Earth is free. All human colonies are free. We won. The bridge erupted, not in celebration exactly, but in a release of tension that had been building for 30 years. People cried, hugged each other, collapsed from emotional exhaustion. Some laughed. Some could not process what they had just heard. They had prepared for death and somehow found survival instead. Boknam saluted Taman formally. "Director, the fleet awaits your orders." Taman looked around the bridge at faces he had known for decades. These people had trusted him, followed his impossible plan, turned humanity into something new. They deserved better than a broken old man who could barely stand. "Stand down all combat operations," he said, his voice hoarse. "Begin recovery of damaged vessels. Send medical ships to assist wounded crews, and prepare memorial services." He paused, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We lost over 200,000 people today. Each one of them deserves to be remembered." The crew moved to follow orders, their professionalism overriding shock. But Taman saw the truth in their eyes. 200,000 dead, 50 more died on the flagship, numbers that would have been unthinkable before the Valthene invasion. Now they were simply the price humanity paid to survive. The Valthene fleet began its withdrawal within hours. Their massive ships, once symbols of overwhelming power, now seemed diminished somehow. They moved with the same elegant grace, but there was hesitation in their formation. An empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds had been forced to retreat by a species that barely had. Spaceflight 30 years ago, Queen Ilvara sent a final message before her flagship entered faster-than-light travel. Her face appeared on view screens across the human fleet, and for the first time, Taman thought he saw genuine emotion in those ancient eyes. "Humans," she said, addressing the entire species. "Today you earned something no other conquered race has achieved. You forced the Valthene Empire to recognize you as equals, not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through determination and sacrifice that surpassed all rational calculation." She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. I granted Taman his wish, believing it would be a brief entertainment. Instead, it became the greatest challenge my empire has faced in millennia. "You should know that what happened here will be studied by every Valthene military academy for the next 1,000,000 years. You have changed how we think about power." Ilvara's gaze focused on where Taman's ship floated among the fleet. "Taman of Earth, you asked for a fair fight. I gave it to you, expecting easy victory. Instead, you showed me that fairness means nothing when one side refuses to accept defeat. Your species terrifies me, not because of your strength, but because of your inability to recognize when you should surrender." She smiled then, a sad and beautiful expression. "I hope we meet again someday under better circumstances, but I also hope it is far in the future, when both our peoples have had time to understand what happened here. Farewell, humans. You have earned your freedom. Try not to destroy yourselves with it." The transmission ended. The Valthene fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving human space behind. After 30 years of preparation and one terrible day of battle, it was over. Taman sat in his quarters that night, unable to sleep. The room was small, functional, everything he needed and nothing more. He had lived in spaces like this for 3 decades, pouring all his energy into preparing for a war that everyone said was impossible to win. Now they had won, and he felt empty. Hyejin found him there, staring at nothing. She sat beside him without speaking, her presence comfort enough. They had survived when so many others had not. Daeyeon was gone. Kaiwan's neural implants had burned out from overuse and would never work again. Somin had lost an arm despite Ilvara's healing. The 4 survivors carried scars that went deeper than flesh. "Are you okay?" Hyejin finally asked. Taman thought about the question. Was he okay? He had accomplished the impossible, saved humanity from extinction, given his species a chance to live free among the stars, and it had cost everything. "I do not know," he admitted. "I thought I would feel different. Victorious, maybe, or at least relieved, but I just keep thinking about everyone who died. Daehyun died so we could reach the throne room. That young soldier whose name I never learned died in the first corridor. 200,000 people died in space today. How do I live with that? By making their sacrifice mean something," Hyejin said quietly. "They died so humanity could survive. Now we have to build something worthy of that sacrifice." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Daehyun told me once that you carried too much guilt, that you blamed yourself for every death, every casualty. He said it would destroy you if you let it. But he also said you were the only one stubborn enough to make the impossible happen. He was a good friend, Taman whispered. The best, Hyejin agreed, and he died knowing we won. That has to count for something. Days became weeks. The human fleet dispersed, returning to colonies spread across 200 star systems. The massive wartime production ended, factories retooling for peaceful purposes. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for war had to figure out how to live without it. The Terran Survival Council held a memorial service on Earth. In what remained of Sol, representatives from every colony attended. Millions more watched from across human space. A wall was constructed listing every name, every person who died in the 30 years of preparation and the final battle. 234,612 names. Taemin stood before the wall, his hand touching the engraved letters spelling Daehyun's name. Beside it were the names of the 45 others who died boarding the Valthene flagship. Below them, endless rows of pilots, engineers, soldiers, civilians who gave everything. We asked them to die for a chance, Taemin said during his speech. His voice echoed across the memorial ground, transmitted to every human settlement. Not a guarantee, not a promise, just a chance. And they said yes. Every single one of them knew the odds and chose to fight anyway. He looked out at the crowd, faces young and old, from every corner of human space, united by shared sacrifice. The Valthene called us primitive. They called our tactics suicide. They were right. Everything we did was impossible by any rational standard. But humans have never been particularly rational when survival is at stake. Queen Ilvara asked if the price was worth it. I said yes, but the truth is more complicated. No victory is worth 200,000 lives. No freedom justifies that much death. But we did not choose this war. The Valthene came to conquer us. They gave us 30 years as a joke, expecting us to fail. We turned their joke into our salvation. Taemin's voice grew stronger. So yes, the price was terrible. Yes, we will carry this guilt forever. But we will also carry the responsibility to make their sacrifice meaningful. We will build a civilization worthy of their memory. We will never forget what it cost to be free. The crowd stood in silence, then began to applaud. Not celebration, but acknowledgement. Recognition of shared trauma and shared survival. After the ceremony, representatives from the council approached Taemin. They wanted him to lead the transition government, to help rebuild human civilization. He refused. His time was done. He had been a weapon forged for a specific purpose, and that purpose was complete. Find someone younger, he told them. Someone who knows how to build instead of destroy. I did what I had to do. Now I need to rest. Boknam took command of demilitarizing the fleet. Mirai led efforts to convert military technology for civilian use. A new generation stepped forward. People who had grown up during the preparation years but were not defined entirely by war. Taemin and Hyejin returned to a small colony on a moon orbiting a distant star. It was quiet there, far from the centers of human civilization. They built a house with their own hands, something simple and peaceful. For the first time in 30 years, Taemin did not wake up thinking about weapons and tactics. But the nightmares came regularly. He would dream of the throne room, of Daehyun's death, of young soldiers throwing themselves at Valthene warriors. Some nights he would wake up screaming, convinced they were still fighting. Hyejin would hold him until the panic passed, neither of them speaking. Words were insufficient for what they had experienced. Yuan visited them 6 months after the war ended. His neural implants had been removed, leaving scars across his skull. He moved 5 years after the war ended. Taemin received an unexpected visitor. He was working in his garden, coaxing vegetables from alien soil, when a shuttle landed near his house. A young woman emerged, barely 20 years old, with determination in her eyes that reminded him of himself decades ago. "Director Taemin?" she asked formally. "My name is Hana. I am writing a history of the war and the 30 years of preparation. I was hoping you would speak with me." Taemin wanted to refuse. He had spent 5 years trying to forget, trying to build a life that was not defined by war. But something in the girl's expression stopped him. She looked at him with the same intensity he had once directed at Queen Ilvara. "I was 12 when the war ended," Hana continued. "I grew up in one of the shipyards on Titan, building vessels designed to die. My parents both served in the fleet. My mother died in the battle. My father survived but never talks about it. Nobody talks about it anymore. Everyone wants to move on." "And you do not want to move on?" Taemin asked. I want to understand, Hana said. 200,000 people died. An entire generation sacrificed everything. Now everyone acts like it was just something that happened. They use the technology, enjoy the freedom, but nobody wants to remember the cost. That feels wrong. Taman studied her for a moment, then gestured toward his house. Come inside. I will tell you what I remember. But I warn you, the truth is not glorious or inspiring. It is just people doing terrible things because the alternative was extinction. Over tea, Taman told his story. Not the official version taught in schools, but the real experience. The fear that never went away. The nights he could not sleep, because simulations showed humanity losing every scenario. The moment he realized his plan required accepting casualties that would horrify any sane military commander. You asked for a war, Hana said, taking notes. Why? Most people would have asked for peace or mercy. Because mercy from an empire is not freedom, Taman replied. If Ilvara had granted peace, it would have been on her terms. She could revoke it any time. But by asking for a fair fight, I forced her to recognize us as potential equals. Even if we lost, we would have gone down fighting on our terms. But you did not think you would win. No, Taman admitted. I thought we would make victory too expensive and maybe force a negotiated settlement. Actually winning, actually reaching that throne room, that was beyond my most optimistic projections. We got lucky. Lucky? Hana looked shocked. You prepared for 30 years. You built 500,000 ships. You trained an entire generation. That was not luck. Taman smiled sadly. Luck was Ilvara being honorable enough to keep her word. Luck was the High Commander choosing pride over tactics. Luck was Daehyun being fast enough to intercept that blade. In war, especially against overwhelming odds, you need luck as much as skill. He showed Hana the memorial he had built in his garden, small stones, each one representing someone who died. There were too many to count, but he knew every name. Sometimes he would sit among the stones and speak to them, telling them about the peace they had died to create.
Do you regret it?
Hana asked. Making the wish? Taman considered the question carefully. Every day. And never. I regret the cost. I regret every death. I regret that an entire generation knew nothing but preparation for war. But I do not regret giving humanity a chance. If I had asked for mercy and Ilvara denied it, I would have regretted that more. They talked for hours. Hana asked about specific battles, about decisions that shaped the war, about the people who made it possible. Taman answered honestly, neither glorifying the war nor diminishing the sacrifice. One more question, Hana said as she prepared to leave. Do you think the Valthine will come back someday? Not as enemies necessarily, but as a presence in our space? Yes, Taman said. Ilvara is thousands of years old. She thinks in timescales we cannot comprehend. 5 years is nothing to her. She will watch us, study us, wait to see what we become. And someday when she decides we are ready, she will return. Will we be ready? Taman looked at the young woman before him, representative of a generation that grew up during the war but was not consumed by it. They had the advantage of learning from the past without being trapped by it. I think so, he said. Your generation understands both war and peace. You know the cost of survival and the value of building. If the Valthine return, you will handle it better than we did. After Hana left, Hijin found Taman sitting among his memorial stones. She joined him silently, understanding without words. Some days were harder than others. Some days the weight of 200,000 deaths felt unbearable. That girl reminded me of you, Hijin said. The same stubborn determination to do the impossible. She reminded me of everyone who fought, Taman replied. Young people who should have had normal lives but instead got war. At least she gets to live in the peace they created. Do you think we will ever truly have peace? Or will we always be preparing for the next threat? Taman pulled a weed from between the stones. I think peace requires constant work just like war. But the work is different, harder in some ways, because there is no clear enemy, no obvious goal. We have to choose what to build rather than simply reacting to threats. 6 months later, Taman received another visitor. This time it was Admiral Boknam, now the head of the new Terran Defense Fleet. She had aged well, the stress of demilitarization leaving fewer scars than war had. Director, she said formally, though they had known each other for decades, the Council is voting on whether to accept the Valthine technology offer. They want your opinion. I am retired, Taman protested. My opinion should not matter. You earned the right for it to matter, Boknam said. You saved humanity. People trust your judgment. Taman sighed. He had hoped to stay out of politics to let the next generation make their own decisions. But perhaps that was cowardice. Perhaps he owed it to those who died to ensure their sacrifice created something stable and good. Tell them to accept, he said. But with conditions. Full transparency on all technology shared. Independent verification of everything. No dependencies that leave us vulnerable. And continued development of our own innovations so we are not simply copying Valthine designs. You trust them? No, Taman said. But I trust that Queen Ilvara understands the cost of fighting us now. We proved we will burn everything down rather than submit. That makes cooperation more valuable than conquest. Boknam nodded. The young ones think you are a hero. They teach your story in schools. The man who saved humanity with a single wish. I'm not a hero, Taman said quietly. I am the person who made 200,000 people die for a chance at survival. Heroes do not make those calculations. Heroes do what is necessary, Boknam replied, even when it costs everything. After she left, Taman walked to the edge of his property, where the alien landscape met distant mountains. The sky here was purple instead of blue, and 3 moons hung in the daytime sky. It was beautiful and strange, a reminder that humanity had spread far beyond Earth. 35 years had passed since the Valthine invaded. 30 since he made his wish. 5 since the war ended. Taman was 63 years old, ancient by the standards of his younger self. His hair was completely white, his body marked by scars both visible and hidden. But humanity survived. That was what mattered. The young ones built new cities, explored new systems, created art and culture that had nothing to do with war. They used the technology purchased with blood to make lives better. They remembered the sacrifice while refusing to be defined by it. Taman thought about Queen Ilvara sometimes, wondering what she was doing, whether she thought about the humans who had forced her empire to retreat. He imagined she did. An immortal being probably replayed significant events endlessly, trying to understand what had happened. One evening, as Taman sat watching the triple moonrise, Hiejin joined him with news. The council approved the technology sharing agreement. They also established the Daehyun Memorial Institute for Strategic Studies. They want to study what we did, how we did it, to ensure humanity never has to do it again. Good, Taman said. Learning from the past is important. Just do not let them glorify it too much. War should never be glorious. They also want to name the new flagship after you, the Taman. Absolutely not, Taman said firmly. Name it after Daehyun or Giwon or any of the 200,000 who died. I do not need ships named after me. Hiejin smiled. I told them you would say that. They are naming it the Defiant instead. After your command ship. Better, Taman admitted. Defiance is what saved us. Refusing to accept defeat when any rational being would have surrendered. They sat in comfortable silence, brother and sister who had survived the impossible together. Eventually Hiejin spoke again. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had asked for something different? If you had asked for peace or mercy instead of war? Every day, Taman said. But I think I made the only choice that gave us a real chance. Peace granted by an enemy is not peace. It is just delayed war. By asking for a fair fight, I forced Ilvara to see us as potential equals rather than conquered subjects. And the cost was terrible. Will always be terrible. But the alternative was extinction or slavery.